Star Wars fans, the new book From a Certain Point of View is coming out soon for Return of the Jedi. We've gone over some of the stories from A New Hope and from The Empire Strikes Back, and the new one is coming out, and one of the sections is Ben Kenobi discussing the darkness inside of Luke, and that's why he didn't tell Luke about his father being Vader. This has opened some discourse about whether or not Luke was strong in the dark side, or whether or not this makes sense. It does make sense to me, and we're going to go over some of the reasons why. The dark side was raging through Luke, but he overcame it. Today, I'm bringing you through the Return of the Jedi novelization, where Luke is confronting Vader and the Emperor. And in this section of the novel, Luke mentions the darkness and wanting to give into it quite a lot. Like, a lot. So, let's go over that right now and see the darkness inside Luke, how prominent it actually was. So, we start with Luke and Vader getting into the elevator aboard the Death Star to go see the Emperor. They opened the elevator door. Luke stepped forward. His mind was buzzing with what to do. It was the Emperor he was being taken to now. The Emperor. If Luke could but focus, keep his mind clear to see what must be done and do it. And a great noise filled his head, like an underground wind. He hoped Leia deactivated the deflector shield quickly and destroyed the Death Star, now, while all three of them were here, before anything else happened. For the closer Luke came to the Emperor, the more he feared what could happen. A black storm raged inside of him. He wanted to kill the Emperor, but then what? Confront Vader? What would his father do? And what would Luke do if he was faced with his father first? If he faced him and destroyed him? The thought was at once repugnant and compelling. Destroy Vader, and then what? For the first time, Luke had a brief, murky image of himself, standing at his father's body, holding his father's blazing power, and sitting at the Emperor's right hand. He squeezed his eyes shut against the thought, but it left a cold sweat on his brow, as if death's hand had brushed him there and left its shallow imprint. Now, we jump ahead just a bit to Luke actually being in the Emperor's presence. Luke stared back brazenly at the bent, hooded figure, defiantly. The Emperor's smile grew even softer though, even more fatherly, and he looked down at Luke's restraints. "You no longer need these," he added, with noblesse oblige, and made the slightest motion with his fingers in the direction of Luke's wrists. At that, Luke's binders simply fell away, clattering noisily to the ground. Luke looked at his own hands, free, now, to reach out for the Emperor's throat, to crush his windpipe in an instant. Yet the Emperor seemed gentle. Had he not just let Luke free? But he was devious too, Luke knew. Do not be fooled by appearances, Ben had told him. The Emperor was unarmed. He could still strike. But wasn't aggression part of the dark side? Mustn't he avoid that at all costs? Or could he use darkness judiciously and then put it away? He stared at his free hands. He could have ended it all right there. Or could he, Luke wondered. He had total freedom to choose what to do now, yet he could not choose. Choice, the double-edged sword. He could kill the Emperor. He could succumb to the Emperor's arguments. He could kill Vader. And then, Luke thought, he could even become Vader. Again, this thought laughed at him like a broken clown until he pushed it back into the back corner of his brain. The Emperor sat before him, smiling. The moment was convulsive with possibilities, and the moment passed. Luke did nothing. He eventually saw the Emperor actually lick his lips at the sight of Luke's thoughts, lick his lips and laugh from the bottom of his throat, the bottom of his soul. Luke paused, for he saw something else as well, something he hadn't seen before in the Emperor. Fear. Luke saw fear in the Emperor. Fear of himself, fear of Luke's power. Fear that this power could be turned on him, on the Emperor, in the same way Vader had turned it on Obi-Wan. Luke saw this fear in the Emperor, and he knew now that odds had shifted ever so slightly. He had glimpsed the Emperor's nakedest self. With sudden absolute calm, Luke stood upright, and he stared directly into the malign ruler's hood. Now we jump ahead again to Luke looking out at the battle, where the rebellion has been caught in the Emperor's trap. Luke is watching the rebellion fall in the space battle, and it makes him angry. Luke watched in horror as another rebel ship toppled against the unseeable deflector shield, exploding in a fiery concussion. Vader watched Luke. His boy was powerful, stronger than he'd ever imagined, and he could still be turned. He was not lost yet, either to the sickening, weakly light side of the Force that had to beg for everything it received, or to the Emperor, who feared Luke with reason. There was yet time to take Luke for his own, to retake him, to join with him in dark majesty, to rule the galaxy together. It would only take patience and a little power to show Luke the exquisite satisfaction of the dark way, and to pry him from the Emperor's terrified clutch. Vader knew Luke had seen it too, the Emperor's fear. He was a clever boy, young Luke, and Vader smiled grimly to himself. He truly was his father's son. The Emperor interrupted Vader's contemplation with a cackled remark to Luke. "As you can see, my young apprentice, the deflector shield is still in place. Your friends have failed, and now," he raised his spindly hand above his head to mark this moment, "witness the full power of this fully operational battle station." He walked over to the comlink and spoke in a gravelly whisper, as if to a lover. "Fire at will, Commander." Luke watched in impotent horror as the unbelievably huge laser beam radiated out from the muzzle of the Death Star. It touched, for only an instant, one of the rebel star cruisers that was surging into the midst of the heaviest fighting, and in the next instant, the star cruiser was vaporized, blown to dust, returned to its most elemental particles in a single burst of light. In the numbing grip of despair, with the hollowest of voids devouring his heart, Luke's eyes, alone, glinted, for he saw again his lightsaber lying unattended on the throne, and in this bleak and livid moment, the dark side was much within him. Luke's face was contorted, reflecting his spirit. Vader watched him carefully, as did the Emperor. The lightsaber began to shake on its resting place. The young Jedi's hand was trembling, his lips pulled back in grimace, his teeth grinding. The Emperor smiled. "Good, I can feel your anger. I am defenseless. Take your weapon, strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey toward the dark side will be complete." He laughed and laughed. Luke was able to resist no longer. The lightsaber rattled violently on the throne, and then it flew into his hand, impelled by the Force. He ignited it a moment later and swung it with his full weight downward toward the Emperor's skull. In that instant, Vader's blade flashed into view, parrying Luke's attack an inch above the Emperor's hand. Sparks flew like forging steel, bathing Palpatine's grinning face in a hellish glare. Luke jumped back and turned, lightsaber upraised, to face his father. Vader extended his own blade, poised to do battle. The Emperor sighed with pleasure and sat in his throne, facing the combatants, the sole audience to this dire, aggrieved contest. And now we jump forward in this battle to when Luke is hiding. We jump to Vader taunting him with threats about his sister, where Vader threatens to turn Leia to the dark side, and it sends Luke over the edge. That's where we enter back in now. This, then, was Luke's breaking point, for Leia was everyone's last hope. If Vader turned his twisted, misguided cravings on her, "Never!" he screamed. His lightsaber flew into his own hand, igniting as it came to him. He rushed to his father with a frenzy he'd never known, nor had Vader. The gladiators battled fiercely, sparks flying from the clash of their radiant weapons. But it was soon evident that the advantage was all Luke's, and he was pressing it. They locked swords, body to body. When Luke pushed Vader back to break the clinch, the Dark Lord hit his head on an overhanging beam in the cramped space. He stumbled backwards even further, out of the low-hanging area, and Luke pursued him relentlessly. Blow upon blow, Luke forced Vader to retreat, back onto the bridge that crossed the vast, seamlessly bottom shaft to the power core. Each stroke of Luke's saber pummeled Vader, like accusations, like screams, like shards of hatred. The Dark Lord was driven to his knees. He raised his blade to block yet another onslaught, and Luke slashed Vader's right hand off at the wrist. The hand, along with bits of metal, wires, and electronic devices, clattered uselessly away, while Vader's lightsaber tumbled over the edge of the span into the endless shaft below. Luke stared at his father's twitching, severed, mechanical hand, and then at his own black-gloved artificial part, and he realized suddenly just how much he'd become like his father, like the man that he hated. Trembling, he stood above Vader, the point of his glowing blade at the Dark Lord's throat. He wanted to destroy this thing of darkness, this thing that was once his father, this thing that was him, Luke realized. Suddenly, the Emperor was there, looking on, chuckling with uncontrollable, pleasured agitation. Good, kill him. Your hate has made you powerful. Now fulfill your destiny and take your father's place at my side. Luke stared at his father beneath him, then at the Emperor, then back at Vader. This was darkness, and it was the darkness he hated, not his father, not even the Emperor, but the darkness in them, and in himself. And the only way to destroy the darkness was to renounce it, for good and for all. He stood suddenly erect, and made the decision for which he'd spent his life in preparation. He hurled his lightsaber away. Never, never will I turn to the dark side. You have failed. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. And that's where we end. Throughout the entire confrontation, Luke fought the darkness inside of him. He wanted to give in to it because, as Vader said, he is the son of Anakin Skywalker. Of course, in the end, Luke goes to the light and rejects the Emperor, one of the greatest scenes in cinema ever. But it's really interesting to see Luke fight the darkness and acknowledge that it's there. He said that he could become Vader. He said that he was Vader after chopping him down. He wanted to snap the Emperor's neck. He said the dark side was strong within him. He was one with the dark, and in the end, he stayed in the light. I think Obi-Wan not telling Luke that Vader is his father because he sensed the darkness in Luke, I think it does make some sense. Could Luke have easily gone down the dark path just like his father? Yeah, absolutely. But what did you think of all this? Let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was fun to make. I really enjoyed this one, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.